They told us history is just dates, kings, and wars. But what if I told you the most important stories were never meant to be told? And if you skip this video right now, you might miss the truth they tried to erase forever. Because long before textbooks existed, powerful rulers learned one simple rule: control the story, control the people. And that's exactly what they did. They hid discoveries, destroyed evidence, silenced witnesses, and rewrote the past to protect their power. But cracks are now showing, and through those cracks, forgotten truths are finally coming out, truths that could change how you see the world. For example, ancient civilizations were far more advanced than we're told. They didn't just build stone huts. They created massive cities, complex engineering, and mysterious technologies that modern science still struggles to explain. And strangely, many of these achievements vanished from history without a trace. Not because they were lost, but because someone made sure they were forgotten. Entire libraries were burned, sacred texts destroyed, and knowledge was locked away where only the elite could access it. Ask yourself, why would anyone destroy knowledge unless it threatened their control? Because knowledge gives people power, and power makes rulers nervous. Take the Library of Alexandria, one of the greatest centers of knowledge ever built, holding scrolls from every corner of the ancient world: medicine, astronomy, engineering, philosophy, and suddenly it was gone, burned to ashes, and with it, centuries of human progress disappeared, and we're told it was just an accident. But accidents don't erase entire civilizations, accidents don't conveniently remove dangerous ideas, and accidents don't benefit those already in power. And here's where it gets darker. Ancient maps show lands we supposedly discovered thousands of years later. Old texts describe flying machines, advanced surgery, and electricity long before modern times. But those parts were labeled as myths, legends, or fantasy, because accepting them would mean admitting history is incomplete, and worse, manipulated. And manipulation isn't just old history, it's still happening today. Governments decide what gets taught, media decides what gets shown, and uncomfortable truths quietly disappear. Have you noticed how certain events are barely mentioned, certain figures are ignored, and certain stories are simplified until they lose all meaning? That's not coincidence, that's control. Because when people only know half the story, they can never see the full picture. And when they can't see the full picture, they can't question the system. Now, here comes the twist. Some of the erased history isn't about kings or wars. It's about us, about what humans were capable of. Ancient humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving, building, innovating, and possibly even exploring the skies, but admitting that would destroy the idea that progress only comes from modern systems. Because if ancient people were already advanced, then maybe today's power structures aren't as special as they want us to believe, and that idea scares them. So instead, history was rewritten to make the past look primitive, simple, and powerless, while the present looks superior, but clues remain, hidden in old carvings, lost languages, forbidden books, and underground archives. And slowly, researchers are connecting the dots, discovering that many myths were actually records of real events: floods, celestial disasters, forgotten technologies, and even global civilizations that existed before recorded history. And suddenly, the timeline we were taught starts falling apart, and that's when the real question hits you. If they lied about the past, what else are they lying about? Because once you realize history can be edited, you realize reality can be shaped. And that's dangerous. Dangerous for anyone who benefits from your ignorance. And here's the emotional truth. This isn't just about ancient secrets. It's about your right to know where you come from, what humans achieved, and what was taken away from us. Because when history is erased, identity is erased. And when identity is erased, people become easier to control. But the erased stories are fighting back. Through uncovered ruins, decoded manuscripts, and brave researchers who refuse to stay silent, the truth is slowly returning, and every recovered fragment exposes another lie, another cover-up, another hid and chapter. And the final reveal is this: history was never lost, it was locked away, and the key isn't in a museum or a government vault. The key is curiosity, because the moment you start asking questions, the moment you stop accepting simple answers, the erased history comes back to life, and once you see it, you can never unsee it, because the real power was never in the past. It was always in the truth, and now that truth is yours. They thought burning the books would erase the truth, They believed destroying the evidence would end the story, but history has a strange habit of surviving, even when people try their hardest to kill it, because fragments always remain, hidden in ruins, whispered in legends, carved into stone, and buried under layers of lies. And those fragments are now starting to speak again, louder than ever, because something massive is being uncovered, something that doesn't fit the clean, simple version of history we were taught in school. And once you hear it, you'll never look at the past the same way again, because across the world, archaeologists keep finding structures that shouldn't exist, tools that don't match the timeline, and technologies that feel impossible for primitive humans, massive stone blocks cut with laser-like precision, ancient tunnels running for miles beneath cities, and perfectly aligned monuments that track the stars with mathematical accuracy. And we're told it's coincidence, luck, or simple tools. But here's the twist. ESA discoveries keep happening in places where advanced knowledge wasn't supposed to exist, and every time the evidence gets stronger, the explanations get weaker, and that should make you ask a dangerous question. What if ancient humans weren't just smarter than we think? What if they were more advanced than we're allowed to believe? Because admitting that would destroy the story of slow, controlled progress. It would prove that powerful knowledge existed long before modern systems, and that knowledge didn't come from governments, universities, or corporations. It came from people, and people with knowledge are harder to control, and that's where things start to feel uncomfortable. Because the more researchers dig, the more resistance they face, funding gets cut, discoveries get reinterpreted, and controversial findings quietly disappear from mainstream conversation. And suddenly, history doesn't look like a search for truth anymore. It looks like a carefully managed narrative, because certain facts are allowed and others are not, and the ones that aren't allowed usually threaten the idea of centralized power. Now let's talk about the forgotten engineers of the ancient world. Civilizations that built water systems, earthquake-resistant cities, and massive infrastructure without modern machines. Some of these systems were so efficient that modern cities still use them today, yet their creators are barely mentioned, their names lost, their achievements minimized. And here's the emotional twist. These weren't kings or emperors. They were ordinary people, builders, astronomers, healers, and thinkers, whose knowledge was shared openly, not controlled by elites, and that kind of world doesn't fit the story of top-down power. So it was erased, replaced by simple tales of rulers and wars, because it's easier to control people with heroes and villains than with truth and collaboration. And then there are the ancient disasters, global floods, sudden climate shifts, and mysterious extinctions recorded in myths across every culture. From Mesopotamia to the Americas, different languages, different lands. Same story, and we're told these are just legends, but here's the problem. Geology, ice cores, and ocean sediments now confirm that massive catastrophic events really did happen, events that could have wiped out advanced societies. And if that's true, then history didn't start with us, it restarted, and what came before was conveniently forgotten. And that changes everything. Because if civilizations rose and fell before recorded history, then human progress isn't a straight line, it's a cycle. And cycles can be controlled, reset, and manipulated. And that's where the real fear begins. Because a society that understands cycles can prepare for them. But a society kept in the dark can too. And guess which one we are? Now think about how information moves today. Filtered, edited, simplified, and sold. Just like ancient knowledge was. The tools have changed, but the strategy hasn't. Control the narrative, control the future. And the scariest part is, most people don't even notice, because the story feels comfortable, familiar, safe. But comfort is the enemy of curiosity, and curiosity is the enemy of control, and that's why uncomfortable history gets buried. But buried doesn't mean gone, because underground, researchers are finding hidden chambers, sealed vaults, and encoded texts. Some of them deliberately designed to survive destruction. Knowledge written in symbols, patterns, and stone, meant to last longer than paper, longer than empires, longer than lies. And when these codes are cracked, they reveal something shocking: advanced astronomy, complex mathematics, and warnings about future disasters. Messages from the past, aimed at the future, aimed at us. And here comes the next twist. Many of these messages talk about knowledge being restricted after great catastrophes, about small groups preserving secrets while the masses were left in the dark. And that pattern sounds disturbingly familiar, because even today, powerful technologies exist that most people don't understand, don't control, and don't benefit from. And history starts to feel less like a story and more like a blueprint, a repeating system of rise, collapse, and control. And if that's true, then we're not just learning about the past, we're looking at our own future. And the emotional weight hits hard because every erased civilization, every burned library, every silenced voice represents lost potential, lost ideas, and lost chances for humanity to grow together instead of under control. And yet, hope still exists, because unlike ancient times, we now have something they didn't: global communication, digital archives, and millions of curious minds. And curiosity spreads faster than fire. And once people start questioning, the old walls crack. Because you can burn the internet, you can't silence every voice, and you can't erase a question once it's been asked. And the biggest question of all is this: if history was edited to protect power, what happens when the truth becomes impossible to hide? Because power doesn't disappear quietly. It fights back, and we're already seeing it. Debates over education, censorship, misinformation, and acceptable narratives. All signs of a system trying to hold on to the story. But stories belong to people, not rulers. And when people reclaim their past, they reclaim their future. And here comes the reveal that changes everything. The real reason history was erased wasn't just to hide the past, it was to shape what we believe is possible. Because if you believe humans were always limited, you accept limits. But if you know humans once achieved greatness without modern control systems, you start demanding more. From leaders, from institutions, and from yourself. And that's dangerous for anyone who profits from low expectations. And that's why the erased history matters. Not because it's ancient, but because it's powerful. Powerful enough to remind us that knowledge doesn't belong to the few. It belongs to everyone. And the moment we stop treating history like a finished story and start treating it like an investigation, the truth stops hiding and the past stops being silent. And suddenly, you realize something unforgettable. They didn't erase history. They only delayed it. And now it's coming back.